For this homework assignment, you are asked to put each of the following statements into symbolic notation using appropriate letters to abbreviate the atomic components. Now, I'll say this at the outset, is that when it comes to symbolizing these statements, you can use pretty much any letters you want. So if moving forward my answers are a little bit different than yours insofar as I use different letters than you do, that's perfectly okay. Beginning with number 2, publicity stunts are effective only if they are comprehensible. And in order to symbolize this, the very first thing we need to do is to figure out the component propositions. And here we have two. The first component proposition is publicity stunts are effective. And then the second one is they are comprehensible. So we could use any letters we wanted for this, but the letters I chose were, if it'll come up, S and C. And what S represents here is this publicity stunts. I use S for stunts, and they are comprehensible. I use the C for that. And this, we have our connective right here, only if, which, remember when you see only if, that's basically you just leave the propositions exactly in place where they are. And here's how you would symbolize it. We use the horseshoe to symbolize the hypothetical or conditional. And so this one is simply S, or if S then C. Like I said, we use the horseshoe to symbolize the if-then relationship. Number 2, if you have to ask, then you'll never know. So in order to symbolize this, the first thing we have to do is identify our component propositions. The first one is you have to ask. The second component proposition is you'll never know. So we could use any letters we want, but I'm going to use A for the first one, and then I'm going to use K for you will know. Now notice we have in this two connectives. We have if and then notice we have another one, a negative, a never, a never. So right here, remember we're trying to break these propositions down to their atomic components, and an atomic proposition is one that has no connectives. We had 5 connectives, one of those was negation. So we're going to have to use our tilde, which that was poorly drawn, to represent the consequent of the hypothetical. The hypothetical here is the if-then. The consequent is not know. And the way we symbolize not know is we use the tilde for not and the K for no. And here's how you would put this proposition into symbolic form. If A, then not K. All right. Number 6, you'll have fun if you just relax. So we have to identify our atomic propositions. You'll have fun if you relax. And we could use any letters we want. I'm going to use F to represent this atomic proposition and an R to represent this one, you just relax. And here we have our connective, if. Now whenever you have P if Q, or in this case it's going to be F if R, you have to reverse the order of these two, because what you're basically saying is if you relax, then you'll have fun. In other words, we symbolize it like this right here. We use the horseshoe to show the conditional, i.e. hypothetical relationship, and if you say you'll have fun if you just relax, basically what you're saying is if you just relax, then you'll have fun. Number 6, I'm getting into some slightly more difficult ones here. If you work hard and long, you'll find success in the end. Now notice we have a lot of connectives going on. We have if, we also have and, which is a connective. So we have a couple of different component propositions. We have you work hard and you work long, then you'll find success in the end. So we have 3 different atomic propositions. So we can use an H to symbolize you work hard. We'll use an L to symbolize long, you work long, and then we'll use, I hope this is right, I might have used an S, I can't remember, but right now we'll say an E to say, actually I think I used an S. we'll use an S to represent success. That looks like a 5. Crap. You'll find success in the end. So we have two connectives. You work hard, you work long, you'll find success in the end. And we realize that these right here, you work hard and you work long, they go together. And they form the antecedent of this conditional, the if-then. And the way we symbolize it is just as follows. And I didn't use an S at all. I used an F for some unknown reason to me. So I have no earthly idea why I used an F for this proposition. That makes no sense. Maybe because you'll find. Okay. So this is how we symbolize this proposition. Like I said, I mean, you could have used E, you could have used S, you could have used letters that made no sense, which I thought I did, but this is how we symbolize it. Now, I want to point out here that the antecedent to this hypothetical here, or this conditional, is this entire thing, H and L, hard and long. That is the antecedent, and the consequent is just F. So this is how we symbolize this proposition. Number 11, the wedding will be perfect unless it rains or the groom doesn't show. Now this is a tricky one, and the first thing I want to do is figure out all the various connectives we have. And as it turns out, we have 3 connectives. We have unless, we have or, and then notice we have not right here. The groom does not show. So this is going to be a pretty complicated one. All right, well, let's figure out what the atomic propositions are. Well, we have one atomic proposition here. The wedding will be perfect, all right? And let's just use a W to represent the wedding will be perfect. Unless it rains, and we're going to use an R for rains, or the groom doesn't show. So we'll use a G to represent the groom does show, and the way that we show this proposition, the groom doesn't show, is we're going to say not. All right, not G means the groom doesn't show. G is the atomic proposition, which is the groom does show, and we're saying not the groom does show. Now, notice here that we have an or. Rains or the groom doesn't show. So we're going to say it like this. And I hope you can see that what we have going on here is we have this unless, which represents an if-then statement. And what we have is we have the antecedent and the consequent, and we have this whole part right here, the wedding will be perfect. I'm not going to answer it for you right now, but that entire thing is either the antecedent or the consequent. And then R or not G, that's also this compound proposition right here, R or not G, that is itself either the antecedent or the consequent. So let's just write this really quickly. W unless, wow, this is poor. Unless R or not G. All right, all of this goes together. Now, hopefully you remember, whenever you see something like P unless Q, whenever you see P unless Q, we always rewrite that to be not Q, then P. Remember, if I say, I will die unless I receive enough oxygen, that means if I don't receive enough oxygen, then I will die. And in this case right here, Q is actually your antecedent, right? And P is actually your consequent. I know it doesn't look that way when you just write it P unless Q, but it is, because the antecedent is what, actually your antecedent is not Q, but that's what's supplying the sufficient condition for the consequent here. So if we're looking at this, W unless R or not G, this entire thing right here, this entire proposition is your antecedent. And so the way that we rewrite this, W unless R or not G, is going to be like follows. Not R or not G, then, or I should say if not R or not G, then W. The wedding will be perfect unless it rains or the groom doesn't show. In other words, if it's not the case that it rains or the groom doesn't show, then the wedding will be perfect. So that's how you rewrite this. This one was really tough. If you didn't get this one, don't stress too much. If you did, kudos to you. Great job. Number 13, either you'll come to the barbecue and enjoy yourself, or you'll stay at home and be depressed all day. The way we symbolize this one is just as follows. Now let me try to explain this one for those who didn't get something like this. But basically what you're saying here is either you'll come to the barbecue and enjoy yourself, or you'll stay at home and be depressed all day. So let's look at the connectives we have. We have and, and we also have or right here. And what you're saying is either you'll come to the barbecue and enjoy yourself, or you'll stay at home and be depressed all day. And notice that you have you have a disjunction right here, and then you have two disjuncts. The first disjunct is you'll come to the barbecue and enjoy yourself all day. The second disjunct is you'll stay at home and be depressed all day. But notice that each of the disjuncts is itself a compound proposition. And the first one says you'll come to the barbecue and enjoy yourself. Well, we use a B to represent you'll come to the barbecue, an E to represent you'll enjoy yourself. Then the second disjunct is you'll stay at home and be depressed all day. Again, we have and here, so this disjunct is a compound proposition. And I use H to represent you'll stay at home, and I use D to mean you'll be depressed all day. And so this is how we symbolize this. B and D or H and D. You'll come to the barbecue and enjoy yourself, or you'll stay at home and be depressed. All right, this is a fun one. If nominated, I will not run, and if elected, I will not serve. Now, how many connectives do we have here? Well, we have an if, then, we have a not, we have and, we have, sorry, we don't have an I. We have a not here. So forget about this. I got carried away. So we have a couple. We have, we had the if. That's what I was looking for. We have an if, we have a not, we have an and, we have an if, and we have a not. So let's just go through this and say, use an in. If nominated, I will not run. So how do we symbolize not run? It's going to be something like this, not run. If nominated, I will not run. And this is how we represent it. Nominated, then not run. Then we have an and here. All right, and we use a dot to represent and then we have, just hold that thought, if elected, I will not serve. Well, let's say we use an E here to mean if elected, if I am elected, I will not serve. And we say not S for serve. And we represent it. If elected, I will not serve. But it seems like the and, what it's doing is it's joining this proposition here with this proposition here. And so the way we symbolize it is just as follows. If nominated, then I will not run, and if elected, then I will not serve. So there's a lot of symbolism going on here, but I think this one actually is not that complicated to see how things work. It's my party, and I'll cry if I want to. This one was a little tricky in my opinion, but let's look at what's going on here. We have how many connectives? And we have if. So the first one, let's say we use a P to represent it's my party, and we'll use C to represent I'll cry, and a W to represent if I want to. Well, let's look at what's going on. We have this proposition here, it's my party, being connected to I'll cry if I want to. Now, ignore this first part and just look, I'll cry if I want to. What are you saying? If I want to cry, if I want to cry, then I will cry. In other words, W, then C. If I want to, then I will cry. And this is how we symbolize this proposition. We're saying, it's my party, and if I want to, then I will cry. So, number 26. This one was very complicated. we can visit your family on Christmas, or we can visit my family in the summer, but I won't go to Iowa in the winter or Arizona in the summer. So there's a lot of ands going on here, and ors and nots. But let's see if we can figure out. We can visit your family, or there's a connective. Can visit my family, but remember, but that's a connective. I won't go to Iowa or Arizona in the summer. So we have a lot of connectives. Now remember, but functions as and. So we have disjunction, conjunction, negation, and then another disjunction. So we can visit your family on Christmas, or we can visit my family in the summer. So we can represent that first proposition. Let's just say Christmas or summer. And we say but, which we write it as and. Now, as soon as we do that, it seems like Christmas and summer, these are going together. But I won't go to Iowa in the winter or Arizona in the summer. So you're saying I won't go to, let's say, Iowa or Arizona in the summer. Now the tricky part is, where does this negation go? Where does this negation go? And the way I understand it is that negation actually goes in front of this disjunction, and it's going to look like this. So I'll just put it up here so it's a little clearer. Now you might have wondered and thought, well, look, are you saying something different, or are you saying this? Wow, that was actually good. I'm going to have to take a picture of this. Are you saying this? Oh, that's supposed to be an A, not a Q. Are you saying that? Which of these two are you saying right here? You might wonder which of those is being said. Are you saying are you saying not Iowa or Arizona? Or are you saying not Iowa or not Arizona? And I think it's this one right here. And the reason I think it's that one is because if you were saying this, not Iowa or not Arizona, that's basically saying you'd go to one or the other, right? But I don't think that's what you're saying. You're not saying, well, I'll go to I won't go to Iowa or I won't go to Arizona. You're not saying that you won't do one or the other. You're saying I'm not doing either one. And that's what the first one is saying. The first one is basically saying I am not going to Iowa and I am not going to Arizona. You're ruling out both options. And that's exactly what this one does. Now, I know it's a little hard to see right now, but we're actually going to come back to talk about this in a couple of lessons, that there are different ways you can express propositions. And basically what this proposition right here, and I'm going to write it down here. This, if you say not I or A, that is equivalent. Here we go, there's our biconditional, which means equivalent. That is equivalent to saying the following, to saying not I, and we use our dot for that, not A. These propositions mean the exact same thing. Saying not Iowa or Arizona, you're saying not Iowa and not Arizona. And I think that's that's what you're saying here. You're saying I'm not going, both of those are off the table, right? And that's clear what this proposition is saying, that I am not going to Arizona and I'm not going to Iowa and I am not going to Arizona. That's the same thing as saying I am not going to Iowa or Arizona, right? Those mean the exact same thing. So that's why, since this was expressed using or, that's why we use it right here. But we could have, if we wanted, substituted in place of this proposition. We could have used this one right here. They mean the exact same thing. So you'll find this out, like I said, in a few lessons. But basically, all these connectives you can explain in terms of the other. We can write conditionals in terms of conjunction. We can write conjunction in terms of conditionals. I think as long as you have negation and one other connective, you can rewrite all the other ones. You can express every one of the other connectives, biconditional, conditional, disjunction, just using conjunction and negation. You can write all the other ones. So we'll learn more about that in the future. But 27. You should fill out either the singles form or the married form, but not both. So let's look at our connectives here. We have a couple. You should fill out either the singles form or the married form, but, which means and then not, we have that. So we could use, S to represent you should fill out the single form and M to represent the married form. And we see here that we're saying S or M. And then the question becomes, all right, well, we have that, and then it says but, which we know means and, not both. So how do we represent not both? Well, we're actually going to reuse our letters here, S and M. And the way we're going to show not both is we'll say not S and M. And I'll put this up here. So you should fill out the singles form or the married form and not both singles and married. So that's how we symbolize number 27. I thought this one's not that complicated. The only thing that I think might have tripped you up is you may not have known you could reuse the symbols. But you're basically, when you say not both, I guess you could have just used a B to represent both. But when you say both, that is communicating a conjunction. And remember, we're trying to break the propositions down into their atomic propositions. The atomic propositions here would be you should fill out a singles form, you should fill out a married form. Saying both, you're saying singles and married. That's what you're saying. So that's why, that's an M right there, by the way. That's why you reuse the symbols here, S and M. You reuse them because they already are capturing the atomic propositions that are needed. 29. If this one, in my opinion, was the hardest one out of all of them. So we'll see if you got this one, there's an extra star on your crown in heaven. But if an object is dropped, it will fall unless some other force counteracts gravity. So I don't remember what letters I used on my answer, but here we have two conditionals. We have if, and then we have unless. And here's how I think is the easiest way to think about it. If an object is dropped, there's our antecedent, right? And we'll use a D. Then it will fall unless some other force counteracts gravity. So here's what you should do. You should think of this as a conditional, if, D, then, and here's the antecedent. Here's the consequent. The antecedent of this if, then is going to be, here's the antecedent, D, and this entire proposition right here, it will fall unless some other force counteracts gravity. That is the consequent. Now, we're just going to look at it like this. If D, then, and it's this entire thing right here. This entire thing that I'm going to underline. That goes in these parentheses. Now, the reason I've left it open is due to the fact that we have another conditional embedded in here. It will fall. Let's use an F to represent fall unless some other force counteracts gravity. I'm going to use a G to represent gravity. Now, so basically what we have here is unless G. So if D, then F unless G. Now, how do we write F unless G? Again, whenever you see something like this, F unless G, you switch the G to the front and you negate it. So you'd write not G, then F. Why? Because go back to the example I gave a long time ago. I will die unless I receive enough oxygen. That means if I don't receive enough oxygen, then I will die. So this is how you would write this proposition up here, just like this. D, if D, we'll use a horseshoe, then not G, then if not G, then F. So here's how we would symbolize it. Like I said, I honestly thought this was the trickiest one out of all of them, just because you have the conditional embedded with the conditional, and you're also using that word unless, and sometimes that word unless is a little difficult to keep in mind what it means, because you have to introduce a negation. All right, and I think this is the last one. He's either a knave or a fool, but he isn't both a knave and a fool. So how do we do this one? Well, let's look. Either we have or here, we have isn't, and we also have both, which, we have both a knave and a fool. Sorry, both isn't. I'm sorry, I didn't mean that. We have and. So we have a couple of connectives going on. We could use, let's say, a K for knave and fool. So we have here this proposition K or F, but, we did have but. There's another connective I left out. And remember, for but we use and. He isn't both a knave or a fool. So we're going to reuse knave. We're going to reuse fool. And notice knave and fool. And you're saying, but he isn't both. So how do we do that? Just as follows. Just like this. And here's how we symbolize it. I'll put it down here so it's a little clearer. But look at what you're saying. He's either a knave or a fool, but, that's what the and means, but he's not both a knave and a fool. Now, you're not saying, you might have thought you might be saying this, right? Not knave and not fool. You may have thought this right here instead of this. You might have thought this is what was being said, not K and not F. But you're not saying this. This is saying something different. What this is saying is you are not a knave, or he is not a knave, and he is not a fool. That's technically not what you're saying. What you're saying, he's not both, right? A knave and a fool. And what is said up here leaves open that he could be one or he could be the other, right? That's what this is saying. It's saying, this could be true if he's a knave and he's not a fool, or he's a fool and he's not a knave. The only time this is true is if he's not, a knave and a fool. But it doesn't leave open the possibility that he could be one or the other, which I think the sentence is communicating that the sentences up here is saying three things are possible. One, he's not both a knave. One is he's neither a knave nor is he a fool. It's leaving open also the possibility that he could be a knave and not a fool, or he could be a fool and not a knave. That's what this is saying up here, and that's how we write it right here. We're saying, he's not both, which means he could be one or the other. This proposition right here, not knave and not fool, that's telling us that the only time this is true is if he is not a knave and he is not a fool. But it doesn't leave open the possibility that he could be one or the other. So this one, I don't know, I think it was straightforward, but I could see how there could be some confusion about whether you write what I have right here or you write what's over here. Now, in the next class, we're actually going to talk about how we determine conditions under which propositions are true. We're going to look at something called truth tables. And some of the stuff I've been talking about today about rewriting propositions in different ways, or the meaning of, this proposition right here versus this one over here, I think it'll become a little clearer what I'm driving at once we go over truth tables. But if you didn't get all of these today, I know this can be tricky. But hopefully you're starting to get the sense of how some of these go. And I think as you practice it more and more, it'll become a bit more intuitive how we do this. But like always, if you have any questions about any of this, please feel free to email me, and hopefully I'll be able to clarify any confusion or questions that you do have.